Welcome to this forum again this evening. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at climate justice, which really covers everything we do, because climate justice is about the fact that climate change affects different communities in a different way, and very often affects the most vulnerable communities most of all. And so we're going to look at that. We're going to talk to Clara Espinosa, who's from the City Bridge Trust, about some of the work she's doing on that and how she's developed projects around co-design, which helped her think that way. We've got Hali, who's going to talk to us about how you actually research and look at localities and see how in localities we can approach climate change by what's called a place-based approach. And then we've got Josie, who is here, who is going to talk to us about the work she's doing in trying to get repair cafes developed. And she's doing some really good work in Enfield, because that is really about place-based work. We were going to have also on here Jasmine White. Now, Jasmine is unfortunately not be able to attend because her mother had to go in the hospital today and she had to go with her. And so she's with her this evening. And obviously, family comes first. And so she had to do that. She sent me a very apologetic letter. She felt very embarrassed that she wasn't going to be on. But, obviously, I said, you're absolutely right to do what you're doing. And what I'll do is I'll do another 10-minute interview with her on another day and send it out to everyone via the newsletter so people won't miss it, won't be able to ask her questions, but I'll do that. So that should, I hope, work well. I'm recording this, Hali, Josie, and Clara. I hope that's okay, because then what I usually do is, apart from putting on YouTube the whole forum, I put the separate interviews on as well, as many interviews, because people are more likely to watch that than an hour to an hour and a half's forum. So I'm recording, and if you're happy with me doing that, that's what I'll do. Okay, if I could start with Clara this time, we'll have to reorder the agenda because Josie's not here. Not Josie, sorry. Um, uh, we will have to reorder it because Jasmine's not here. So I thought we'd start with Clara first, and then go to Hali, if that's okay, and then go to you, Josie, with the repair cafe at the end. So let's start with Clara. Clara's really interesting because she works with the City Bridge Trust. And over the years, the last few years, they've been reassessing how they fund um, civic society groups. And COVID, I think, was the instrument in making them think that. How do they tackle the big problems that people are facing to ensure sustainability and to enable a responsive approach? And how do they do that by trying to get funding organized in a different way, and how funding can be decided upon by what is called a co-design process, which people are really beginning to work on now. And Clara has been doing that with others in what they call the Anchor program, and she's now beginning to think about how they can do that around climate justice as well. And so it's interesting to talk to her about that and how her thought processes have gone on that. Well, I hope, Clara, I've sort of praised that as correctly as I can, and I'm sure if I've got it wrong, you would tell me. So can we start with you? And if you could tell me, you've been involved in developing these funding opportunities for civil society, like the Anchor Project, and in doing it in a new way. Tell us what the purpose was behind that.
Thanks, Francis. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Um, I'll give a bit of background as to what City Bridge Foundation does. We had a recent name change, Francis. Well, not well, in the last 2 years. We're now City Bridge Foundation and not City Bridge Trust. Um, so we are London's largest independent funder, and we've been around since 1995. Um, we are the funding arm of Bridge House Estates, and Bridge House Estates has been around for 900 years. and it owns the 5 bridges in the square mile. So Tower Bridge, London Bridge, Blackfriars Bridge, Southwark Bridge, and Millennium Bridge. Um, and so we are, as a foundation, we are primarily a bridge owner. And secondary to that is we are a funder. So back in 1995, it was decided that our surplus income would be used for charitable objectives. So that's where City Bridge Foundation was born. We're based at the City of London Corporation, and they are our sole trustee. Um, but to answer your question, Francis, the purpose behind the Anchor program was, um, well, it primarily came about during the pandemic. We were thinking about, we were witnessing new ways of funding. We recognized that there was increased access to core funding and flexible funding for organizations. And we saw that this new way of working was strengthening London civil society during quite a challenging time. So we had the idea of creating a funding program like the Anchor program, but before we really started designing it, we held a roundtable session where we invited um, organizations in the sector, and we did some consultation work with them, and we asked them whether a program like the Anchor program um, would be well received in the sector. Um, and basically, the aim of the program it was to fund 7 to 10 years, so to award 7 to 10 years of core funding to infrastructure organisations in London. Infrastructure organisations are organisations that provide support to other organisations, and that could be through the form of capacity building support, organising networks, carrying out policy and research work, and other formats as well. Um, so we had the roundtable session, and from that, the Anchor program was born. Um, we realised that it would be really well received by the sector, especially long-term core funding. Um, and we recognise that infrastructure organisations a lot of them were shutting down during the pandemic. A lot of them weren't receiving a lot of funding. We knew that a program like this would be really well received. So the aim of the Anchor program was to really help infrastructure organisations focus on systems change work, and it was also to support organisations that demonstrate a commitment to intersectional and equitable practice. And we wanted to support infrastructure organisations whose work was led by and for, or at least co-designed by the communities that they support. And the real aim of the program was to fund organisations with a core focus on systems change in order to make London a fairer city. So the program was launched in 2023, and the funds were awarded in 2 rounds. And in total, we awarded £26 million to 22 organisations across the 2 years, across both rounds of funding.
And,
Um,
and that process you're talking about that you did through the Anchor program and through
yeah.
COVID, you are now thinking, aren't you, that you want to look at climate change, not just climate change, but climate justice.
Mm.
Why are you beginning to, in your mind and with your colleagues, think about climate justice? Why is that important to you?
So we've just recently gone through a strategy review at City Bridge Foundation, and we're looking at what our strategy is going to look like for the next 10 years. And we really want to position ourselves as a social justice funder. So that's really focusing on the root causes of inequality and injustice in London through systemic change, but also addressing immediate community needs. So in summary, we want to become a funder that is focusing on changing the systems that are keeping people marginalized. One of the focus areas will be climate justice. And the reason why this is such an important area to be funding is because we recognize that there are groups of people who are disproportionately impacted by the climate crisis. And we recognize that those who have contributed the least are the most impacted. And what the strategy aims to do through the climate justice funding program is to empower the communities that are hardest hit by climate change, as well as environmental hazards and pollution. And we want to support a fair and inclusive transition as London moves towards net zero goals. And we want to fund organisations that are focusing on organising and advocacy work that are being led by those most affected, and ensuring that they can help shape the transition and hold systems accountable as well. And so, why climate justice? I recently read a report that said, and I'm going to quote what the report said, it said, there is perhaps no global issue more interconnected, transversal, and ripe for a systems level approach than climate change. It is the biggest crisis facing Londoners, and it intersects also with racial justice. We know that Black, Asian, and minority ethnic populations are disproportionately impacted by the climate crisis. It also intersects with economic justice. We know that people living in poverty, um, well, people that are living in areas with the highest number of that are most impacted by poverty, they are more exposed to environmental impacts and they can't afford protections to mitigate the effects of climate change on their lives. Um, and they also may live in poorly insulated housing. We know that air pollution is the biggest public health issue. To summarize, there's so much evidence to show that this is an area we should definitely be focusing on as a
And,
funder.
and, and you mentioned, climate justice is about working with those groups most affected, the most
Mm,
vulnerable. And part of your process of funding is to ensure that there is co-design with those
yeah,
groups, isn't it?
yeah.
Do you want to tell us how important it is? Because people use that term co-design,
Mm.
glibly very often, but it has a real content in it, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Um, I think it's really important for funding programs to be co-designed. Um, and I think there should be the reason we were able to co-design during the Anchor program was because there was an openness to doing things differently at City Bridge Foundation, and we recognize that we're constantly asking organizations to evidence the way, why they're doing the work that they're doing, how can they evidence what the need is, yet we don't evidence what our current systems are working as a funder. And there was a real question around who gets to decide what a funding program should look like. So that's why um, we really wanted to ask a group of organizations to help us design the Anchor program. And it would be great to take a similar approach for the climate justice program as well. Um, but also just to recognize that there are some challenges around doing co-design work. We experienced challenges around figuring out how we were going to compensate people for their time because it was such a new thing that we were doing at City Bridge Foundation. We didn't really have a process in place for that. Um, we also it was really important that we made sure that the sessions were inclusive and accessible. We were working with a number of leading deaf and disabled people's organisations that were staffed by wheelchair users and people who are visually impaired. So it's really important when we were holding in-person sessions and online that we were really prioritising accessibility. Um, Also, finding times and dates that work for everyone, being mindful of school holidays, religious holidays when you're doing co-design work is really important. But the number one thing I would say is how crucial it is to build trust with the organizations that you're working with. And also recognizing that there is such a thing as consultation fatigue and constantly asking organizations for their feedback. So how do you make sure that you're doing it in a really safe, inclusive, and accessible way, and that it's not extractive or tokenistic. That's really important. So I definitely think those values should kind of underpin how we do co-design through the
I mean,
justice area.
in your job, which is really an interesting job, you get a chance to. You're smiling.
Yeah.
You you have a chance, don't you, to visit different organisations, and one of them you visited was the Lambeth Climate Partnership, and you
Yeah.
said you would put us in touch with them because they're doing some really interesting work, aren't they? I mean, what did
Mm.
you learn from them?
Yeah, it was really interesting. So they gave a presentation on a piece of research they carried out called Cooling Five Ways. And basically it was research to help most vulnerable residents combat summer heat in Lambeth. So the work captured residents' experience of the recent heat waves that we've experienced in London, and they tested key messages around health vulnerabilities. And they also trialed a simple, low-cost tool called Cool Kits that included cooling blankets and fans. Um, and that was to help keep residents safe and comfortable during the heat wave. Um, but the aim of the research was to inform effective mitigation and adaptation measures for the most vulnerable communities across Lambeth and London. There were lots of findings, and I'm happy to share the link in the chat because they've summarized the findings on their website. But just to highlight a few, they mentioned that public spaces are not designed for the extreme heat we've been experiencing, and there are a lack of adequate facilities and shelter, which exposes residents to high temperatures. They found that 70% of participants that were surveyed, their main concern during heat waves was staying cool when they're outside of their homes, and there's a real lack of access to green spaces for a lot of residents. Um, they highlighted that people need more shade and cool spaces. They need more access to public toilets, access to water fountains, um, and to summarize, the key finding was that urban areas need to be better designed. We need better designed public spaces with cooling infrastructure, water access, and social amenities to make sure that people are comfortable when experiencing extreme heat. But yeah, it
Yeah,
was really interesting to see what the
yeah.
findings were.
Okay, well, thank you for that because I think that's really interesting, and I hope you do put us in contact with Lambeth because
Hmm.
heat excess is one of the themes that we're following, and I know from what you sent me in the links, Lambeth has done a heat strategy which looks quite impressive and is something I think we can learn from, and I think learning from each other from the different organisations in
Mm.
London has a lot of value in it. So thank you for doing that. I'll go on to Hali now, and then I'll open it up to questions. And I know you want to go not right away, but fairly early because I know you've got a heavy cold. Um, but I'll open it up to questions after Hali, and then we'll come to Josie and the repair cafe. So thanks, Clara. That was great, and it's great what the work you're doing, and that you're focusing on climate justice because we believe that is so important as well. Right. So Hali is on our core group and she spoke at our last meeting about a project that we might be getting, and we can talk about that in a moment. And we were discussing then the project that was looking at a particular approach to climate justice. And that is, and I think Clara mentioned it when you're talking about the most vulnerable groups, having a local approach, looking at a locality-based approach, or as is used in many academic terms, a place-based approach, so that you can find out the vulnerabilities of particular groups of people of different parts of London, and then you can form a strategy that's one around adaptation based upon what you find. And now you work, although you live in Enfield, you work with the University of Birmingham, and they do a lot of work on place-based research, don't they? I mean, do you want to tell us what that involves and what that is about?
So, right, I'm working on a project called West Midlands Adapt, and this project is working to develop rapid adaptation pathways for some of the most deprived areas in the Birmingham and the West Midlands. And core to these activities are these World Cafe events that we do, which are co-designed between academics, including myself in the Department of Geography, the Birmingham Voluntary Services Council, and the West Midlands Combined Authority. And these are held at ward level with a focus on trying to understand the lived experience of vulnerable and hard to reach residents with regard to extreme weather and its impacts in their homes, but also in neighborhoods. And this is all done through an intersectional lens. So we try to be sensitive to compound vulnerabilities like age, gender, race, language, disability, chronic ill health, and a huge range of socioeconomic factors. But we also try to understand the strengths and weaknesses of community assets, and I mean this in a broad sense. So networks of support, including neighbors, emergency services, community hubs, utility providers. And we try to understand how responsive they are in terms of protecting people and the places and the things and the relationships they value. But we also have conversations to try and determine at neighborhood level what are local priorities, what are things that people want to protect from extreme weather, and how in the short term and in the longer term, and also why. So being conscious of what the co-benefits are, what are the benefits to people and nature. And then the final element of this place-based approach is bringing these findings to local authorities to share the information, but also to try and have constructive dialogue around how municipal resources can be leveraged or reallocated or coordinated to meet as many of the most urgent priorities as possible, but also to begin exploring longer term solutions, including new governance arrangements and ways of embedding adaptive plans and strategies in a more proactive way rather than the prevalent reactive approach.
I mean, what you're doing is really interesting because it's not just about research, it also has practical applications. And I think that's really important. One of the interesting things about a locality-based approach or a place-based approach is that when a crisis happens, very often communities respond spontaneously. We saw it in COVID. We saw mutual aid groups develop all over the place to help people during that COVID period. And that was really marvelous. That was really incredible. But I think what you're saying, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is, or as good as that is, it's not enough. You do need a much more strategic approach. You need to know how or what to do in the long term. You need to build what I think you call adaptive capacities for dealing with incidents like extreme weather. So is that what you really are focusing on? It's not the spontaneous, though what you do will make spontaneity easier, but having a more strategic approach in developing those adaptive capacities.
So we're doing a lot of research around what are the keys to success, but also what are the obstacles for building adaptive capacities. And our experience in the field, so to speak, working in communities across the West Midlands is really affirming what the research is saying and providing some new empirical evidence. So we know that from, for example, behavioral science, that prior exposure or experience of negative impacts of extreme weather is not actually a major influence on whether people start to take up adaptive behaviors. The strongest predictors of adaptive behavior are whether people perceive themselves able to engage in adaptive actions. That's called self-efficacy in the literature. Whether people believe that their efforts will actually protect them, will make a difference. So whether they can expect positive outcomes. And also a big factor is how people react emotionally to the idea of climate change adaptation. So whether they're skeptics essentially or whether they're optimistic. And we also know that providing people with information on the effectiveness and ease of specific measures is a huge incentive for adaptation. So that's one of the things, well, those are a few of the things that we try to incorporate in our workshops. But also, we know from research on socio-cultural factors that conflicting and competing values can be massive barriers to adaptation. So, where there's not a lot of community cohesion, we know that if you promote certain values, you can incentivize adaptation. So, strengthening what are called biospheric values, it's just value of the environment. And exploiting hedonic values, so the feel-good factor, by highlighting people's previous effective climate actions, and also demonstrating not just the social benefits, but also the costs of not adapting. Those can be really strong incentives. And then there are series of political and structural factors. So we know that it's important to have clear, strong policies to make sure governments act. But the problem is that national policies, most of them, are grounded in global neoliberal practices that are market-oriented and profit-oriented and rooted in agendas of privatization. So this means that no matter how wonderful ambitions are on a global and even national level, these adaptive aims really just get translated into incremental modifications. So they're not nearly transformative or radical enough. And they usually result in top-down, expensive, or technocentric solutions that actually don't help at local level and actually can make things worse, can cause maladaptation. And even though we've seen a proliferation of urban experiments like around transition towns and urban living labs, these lessons are not being converted into more effective governance, mainly because of a lack of political will. So this makes finding ways of engaging with authorities and decision makers in their wards all the more important. And in this sense, local academics, like myself, have an important role to play as mediators. And this is not just what the research says, we're seeing this. So we just did some workshops in Coventry. And the level of hostility, I mean, the willingness that people had to talk about adaptation was phenomenal. There was no climate denialism, there was no governance trap. We're not going to do anything until the state steps up. But there really was a huge sense of mistrust in local authorities. And there were some counselors who were pushing to attend these meetings so that they could, promote their programs. And we had to insist that they didn't come. And it's a good thing that they didn't, because I don't think they would have gotten out of there alive.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting because I guess you're talking about capacity building in a way, but more than that, you're talking about whether the vulnerable communities you're working with feel they can make a difference. They have not just infrastructure capability and capacity; they have personal capacity as well. Now we're hoping to run a project, and we know now that on one of the smaller project we have got funding to do it. That you told me about this week, and it's around climate justice, and it's looking about how a particular area has particular vulnerabilities. How do we find those vulnerabilities? How do we create a vulnerability uh, a file or information about which people are most seriously affected? And having a vulnerability index is important for that. So from that, I think you're hoping that we can then involve the statutory authorities, which you alluded to as being difficult sometimes, in finding if we could develop locally a place-based strategy around that vulnerability of a local community. Am I sort of pricing it correctly? Is that what we're trying to do? And do you think we can do that successfully?
Yeah, so we are working toward co-developing at least a blueprint for devising a place-based strategy for at least one ward in East Enfield. And so what that is going to mean is going into the ward and meeting people where they are, so to speak. And not even every neighborhood within a ward is going to be at the same starting point. So that's going to be a challenge. So we would like to run a World Cafe and at the same time devise what we call the climate risk and vulnerability assessment. So that will be a visual representation of the different layers of risk and vulnerability that include a range of the different socioeconomic layers, as well as some of the environmental risks and infrastructural risks. And then we would like to take these findings to the local authority and see if we can have some kind of constructive engagement that does not involve, confrontation and finger pointing. And then look for ways to hopefully build some inroads into new institutions that are genuinely inclusive and cross-cutting of issues, but have the community concerns at their core. And essentially what this means is laying the groundwork for some kind of new form of governance. And I think this is already in the making. These kinds of bodies exist in the UK and internationally, and so we can talk about transition towns in the UK, different pockets of London. The Civic Square Initiative is doing some wonderful work in this area here in Birmingham, but even in places like Berlin, where urban governance structures are fundamentally different. And I've seen examples of this in Tembisa Township in Gauteng in South Africa, where I've just come from. And here, starting with something like the Local Resilience Forum, I think is a wonderful jumping off point. But of course, none of these examples are perfect or problem-free. I think the key is willingness at political level and ability of municipalities and wards to learn. But really it's about restoring kind of a sense of democracy and coming to terms with how it's been eroded, in essence, by the power of capital, really, and carbon capitalism in particular. And that brings us back to the topic of climate justice, I think.
Yeah, I mean, what I like about it, it's about civil society, democracy, as you say, and that's really, really important. And I guess we start on this in January, so we have a lot of work to begin to do in planning. Okay, well, thank you for that. Let's open it up and see if anyone would like to ask a question. If you could raise your hand if you've got something you'd like to ask. And if you are going to ask a question, if you could put your camera on, it always helps. Can you put your camera on, Asani, first? And while you're doing that, David, would you like to start?
Yes, a bit of information and unrelated question. There is a thing called the Place-Based Initiative. And there's a website, the Great Collaboration UK, where people can say what they're doing about the climate and share it, not with boroughs, but with parish councils. In fact, it's set up together with parish councils across the country, started in Herefordshire, now being expanded in Cambridgeshire, and it might be worth looking because it does collect together lots of things people are doing and what they're trying to do. Not much evaluation yet. Now, the question is closer to the areas of Birmingham. Are any of the areas that you've been studying part of the Place-Based Initiative, the government programme to spend £2 million a year on specifically designed deprived areas? This is something which has hit us, surprised us in Blackbird Leys in Oxford, which is one of the 20% most deprived areas of the country. And the city council's completely confused by this government thing. So it looks like we're going to have to do it by arranging public meetings to collect ideas together in January as part of our neighbourhood plan. And yes, I'd love to find out how to do that sort of thing, how to actually get residents co-designing what they might do with this huge amount of money.
Okay, I mean, Clara, could I bring you in on this? So what's your experience of getting people together to co-design?
So my experience is more from in the funding sector. So in terms of program design and getting consulting organizations in the sector and bringing them together to talk about what, funding programs should look like, what should the eligibility criteria be, what should the application process look like, how do we make sure we're embedding equity throughout the process, how are we evaluating projects that we're funding? So more from that angle. What was your question, Francis?
It was what experience you had with the groups you work with, how they develop co-design, because I think David was asking if there's any sort of hints you can give him.
So I have come across organizations we support that do embed co-design in terms of how they design and deliver the projects. So I'm happy to share. I mean, I don't have live examples right now, the top of my head, but happy to share later.
Okay, if you could, that would be great. And I know, Hali, you want to come on. I mean, what one organisation we're hoping to get in at our next meeting is Civic Square in Birmingham that does a lot of work on co-design. And I know Hali's been in touch with them, but you wanted to respond as well, Hali, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. David, thank you for your comment and your question. And would you mind sharing the link to the, if I understand you correctly, a place-based program in the chat? I'd love to know more. In terms of co-design at neighborhood level, one of the things that we're putting together through the work on WM Adapt is, in fact, a manual so that neighborhoods can hold these conversations themselves. So all the methodology that we're using throughout our workshops, we're doing 16 different World Cafes across Birmingham and the West Midlands. We are going to produce in the form of a manual and just distribute it freely, and that will also be part of our project. Francis will be using that methodology in our funding, but that will be made available for everyone. I also know that there's a partner, this might be interesting for David, one of the partners in WM Adapt that is leading the work on designing rapid adaptation pathways. They're called Climate Sense. So you might want to have a look at what they do on something called RAPAs, Rapid Adaptation Pathways. But we're basically working with them to do that in the West Midlands, and I will be working with them to co-design the processes for designing these rapid adaptation pathways.
Right. David, I don't know if that helps. I'm sure it does. And if we get the manual, we can send that to you. And also, I'll talk to
Thanks.
Local Motion, who we work with, because they're trying to do a lot of things around co-design, and we could talk to them about how they've done it and send that to you.
Yes, I'm interested in basically learning from anyone who's already been doing co-design, and particularly on how to facilitate things so that we actually solve problems rather than generate them.
Yeah. Do you know about the World Cafe method of engaging people, David?
Yes, although I was thinking something halfway between a knowledge cafe and America Speaks 21st Century Town Meetings, where they got 6,000 people in 600 tables of 10 to decide what to do with the Twin Tower site in New York.
Hali, have you still got your hand out? Oh, that's a legacy hand. Okay. Okay. Well, thanks. Asani, you wanted your hand up, but is it possible to put your camera on? Because it's nice to have the camera on when people ask questions. Well, you're trying to see if you can do that. Is there anyone else who wants a question?
Hello, I'm finding it difficult to speak on. Can I speak without it coming on?
Yeah, go ahead. If you can't get it on, go ahead.
My question to Ali is the fact that our concept of climate justice, is it restricted strictly to the UK or, Africa inclusive? Is it strictly, is it, UK specific and all that, or is Africa inclusive? Because I believe Africa is the brunt.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, the reason why Sani's asking that, Hali, is he's from Nigeria. So climate justice, we're talking about what we're going to do locally and what you're doing in Birmingham. But Sani is talking about the global perspective and is wondering what you have to say on that.
I have a lot to say on that, but I don't think there's time, Sonny. My background is I've just come from South Africa, where I worked on climate justice with mining affected communities. So I think it's very important in the South, but I think it means something very different there, especially when we're talking about geopolitics and the fact that the North consumes so much more of the world's resources and produces so much more of the emissions compared to the South. So that's the short answer.
Okay. Is there anyone else who has a question they'd like to raise on this at all? No? Okay, well, we're going to have another sort of open session after the next interview. So let's go on to the next to next interview. Are you there, Josie, at all?
I am.
Okay, that's good. That means we can go on with it. Josie is joining us now, and Josie Ball is someone who's very passionate about meaningful change, and she focuses that in the job she's now got. I think she's only been in it, what is it, 6-9 months? I can't remember what you said, six to nine. And yeah, I know you're passionate about it because it's about really a sort of place-based locality work where you're looking at, through the project you're in, the Restart project, developing repair cafes, which is about not wasting but repairing and reusing in a locality, in a particular place. And so that's important. So if we could start, Josie, and thank you for coming on and for taking part in this. You're involved, as I said, in the Restart project. Can you tell us about what the Restart project is and what you mean by repair cafes?
Yes, definitely. And I'd like to say thank you too for having me. It's really great to sort of be part of this. And I've probably got a lot to learn myself from all the people that are here and some of the things you've been talking about. So the Restart project is a social enterprise. And what we're essentially aiming to achieve is to help people learn how to repair their broken electronics and rethink how they're consuming them in the first place. So really aiming to kind of shift people's mindsets to kind of learn how to repair them and reuse them rather than buying new, and giving people the skills and the confidence to be able to do that. And there are various elements to what we do, one of which is sort of bringing access to repair to communities across the world. So we're kind of global, although I focus on sort of London and my role. And we do that in lots of different ways. We've got things called fixing factories, which are permanent bases on high streets. And we're hoping to have one of these. Our goal is to have one of these on every high street in London. And these are places where people can bring in broken electronics and learn how to fix them. And we're also developing lots of kind of training programs to teach people how to repair different household appliances. And then in addition to that, in my role, I support a network of over 50 different repair groups across London to run community repair events in their areas, which are essentially events that are completely community and volunteer led, where members of the public can bring in their items and not only get it fixed for free, but actually engage in the fixing process and learn from people who have fixing skills about how to sort of diagnose the item they've brought in and hopefully fix it. We've got a kind of platform called Restarters, where everyone in our sort of volunteer and sort of London community can sign up to and chat and look at which events are coming up and sign up to volunteer at them. But there's also another aspect to what we do, which is a lot of campaigning around the right to repair. So what people are doing on the ground across London and globally by delivering these repair events, when items are coming into repair events, a lot of groups collect data on the repairs, so what the items are, how much they weigh, whether they were fixed and what was wrong with them. And this data feeds into kind of our campaigning around the right to repair. And what we're trying to achieve with that is to encourage the big sort of tech companies and things to build products in a way that they're easier to repair for people, and that people can have access to things like repair manuals and spare parts and things, so empowering people. So there's various aspects to what we do, and hopefully that's given a bit of an overview.
No, that's a very good background, and of course you want to try and see if this can be done in Enfield now, don't you? And your idea here in Enfield is to have a repair cafe which is actually mobile, that moves around the borough. Can you tell us how that will work?
Yes, so we're really excited. We're working kind of closely with Enfield Council on this to identify different locations across the borough that these repair cafes could take place. And the aim is to have one repair group, so to build one repair group that moves across. At the moment, it's looking like various libraries across Enfield. So think places like Palmer's Green Library, the Ordnance Library, Enfield Town Library, and Edmonton Green Library. And we're really excited about this because we really want to bring access to repair to all areas in Enfield, and opportunities for people to bring in items and benefit from these cafes in their own way and learn how to repair. And so this will mean that hopefully we can reach different communities across Enfield by doing this. And I think I definitely need to brush up on my knowledge around this, but from what I understand, there's a real sort of mix of different communities that could benefit from repair cafes, and there's higher areas with that are higher income, areas that are lower income, and we really want to find ways. I can see the comment in the chat.
It's Pam saying that they have one in Haringey and they have one that goes around the area. So maybe we could put you in touch with Pam and you could talk to her about what's happening there, and we could learn from them as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely, that would be brilliant.
I mean, you mentioned Enfield Council is working with you, and I'm really quite pleased because it was EnCaf, it was us who put your project, Fiona, in your project in touch with Enfield Council, which started them really thinking about how they could do it, and that's great. But they've helped you with premises and providing some funding, but that is important, but it's not enough. You need volunteers, don't you? You need people to come in and help you and volunteer with the repairing, volunteer with the organisation. Tell us the sort of volunteers you need.
So a variety of volunteers, really, which is why they're such beautiful events, because people from all sorts of different backgrounds with different interests can get involved. What we ideally want for this repair group is for it to be as community-led and volunteer-led as possible. So we're looking essentially for either a group of, say, 2 to 3 really keen organisers and volunteers who want to come together to deliver these events and lead on kind of organising them, and we would kind of support them in understanding how to set up their first repair cafe, and we can provide training and things. Or it could be, a local group or organisation who's really passionate about delivering them. So we're looking for organisers, but we're also looking for the volunteers, the fixers that make magic happen too. So things like electrical fixers, textile fixers, bike fixers. And we really want to grow the group depending on what people in the local area are really interested in, what skills they have and what things they want repairing. So there are other repair cafes in London like Chiswick who offer things like carpentry and suitcase repairs and lots of different kind of repair areas. So it will hopefully grow over time to include other things. And we're looking for kind of volunteers with all skill levels too. So although it's really brilliant to have some people who have a lot of experience specifically in electrical repairing, we're really keen to kind of engage anyone who's got a willingness to learn as well, because we can encourage them to learn from each other and deliver how to fix workshops to build their skill sets and confidence. But there's also opportunity. Sorry, go for it.
As I say, when you get volunteers, How can you be sure, for example, that they're competent? If they're fixing electrical goods, that can be dangerous. So how do you
Yeah.
make sure the volunteers have the training or the competence to be able to do what you want them to do?
Yeah, that's a really valid question. I think sometimes, especially with electrical repairs, people can feel kind of a bit nervous, and that can be a barrier sometimes. So I'm really glad you asked. But in terms of electrical repairing specifically, we can run things like how to fix workshops where we get a group of kind of experienced fixers together, and kind of a range of household appliances that would typically come into a repair cafe, and get everyone to sit down together in teams and learn together how to open up items, diagnose them, and fix them, and learn about the kind of common faults and how to use tools safely. So we're really hoping to do some of those kind of workshops with volunteers to kind of build their confidence. But we've also got, in terms of health and safety, there would be procedures in place that make things as safe as possible and kind of would make people confident in what they're doing. So PAT testing, for example, before and after fixes. And I won't go into all that detail because it's all the boring health and safety stuff. But there are, other things like assigning safety leads and stuff like that. So it's there. Those things are in place to make people feel confident to facilitate things. And yeah, we're definitely.
You're clearly excited by it. I think I saw in one of your social network sites that you said you get a real buzz out of the repair cafe because the buzz comes from seeing people fixing things and being part of something that's sustainable. Is that the enthusiasm that encourages you?
Definitely. Repair cafes are so brilliant because they've got so many different benefits to them and they're sustainable in so many different ways, not just the environmental side. They also bring people together and empower them, through building their skill sets and confidence. But they also build communities and connect people from like all walks of life. And so, I always talk about the kind of like buzz of repair cafes, and I say that there's nothing really beats the buzz of it. And it's like when you step into a really busy repair cafe where everyone's working together to do something positive for the environment. Someone's got something fixed that they've had for so long and that item was really important to them, or someone's been able to fix something because they couldn't afford to buy something new, and that's been really helpful for them. And then you've got people learning and enjoying together. It's pretty special.
Well, let's open it up to people here if they have questions. I mean, several people have put comments in. We mentioned Pamela talking about the Fixers Factory in Haringey, and Cathy Donegan has said, are you in touch with the Fixing Factory in Camden? Do you know of those as well, Josie?
Yes, so although it's not, I'm not in touch with them directly through my role, although I may well be over the coming year. My colleague Arthur, who is our Fixing Factory lead, works very closely with Possible. So it's the Fixing Factory project is kind of a joint partnership between us and Possible, who run the Camden Fixing Factory.
Okay, so you know about that, and you could give people information on that. Anthony, Andrew, you've got your hand up. Oh, Tony, sorry, you had your hand up first, Tony.
So, yeah, I went to the Bowes Park one, and that was really good. And it's interesting that it's evolving from doing electrical and upholstery, and now we're looking at like repairing bikes and things like that, because I think that will draw people in. And also it may bring in people that are willing to become volunteers themselves when they see what's going on. And I wanted to say you can really upskill younger people, because if you get younger people that come along and they can get mentored by someone, it could help someone get into work who can't necessarily work or whatever. But it's good that you're not getting funded by North London Waste Authority. I'm pleased that it's getting funded by the council. So,
Glad you said that, but someone put in the comment, did you know that North London Waste Authority is encouraging this? But that's neither here nor there in a way. But I mentioned, I think to you when I spoke to you first of all, Josie, that there is a repair cafe in London, Borough of Enfield at NYCC in Edmonton, and I think taking Tony's point, they also train people there young people around repairing. And that point that Tony made, I think is quite important. Do you do that in the Repair Cafe? Do you provide a forum, not just for repair, but to train young people to be able to repair?
Absolutely. So Repair Cafe events themselves are great opportunities for people sort of informally to learn as well, with less pressure, because when people, even people who bring in items are encouraged to kind of sit down with the repairer and ask questions and understand what's wrong with the item and how they're fixing it. And sometimes the fixer facilitates them to be able to pick up a screwdriver themselves and help out, which is really great. But we also deliver these we're working on designing training programs to be able to upskill people in repair too. And I think, Anthony, what you said about young people is really, really important. And that is something that we're, as the Restart project, we're looking to support groups across London to engage younger people, both in terms of sort of bringing in items, but also volunteering and learning, picking up these repair skills themselves. So that's definitely something we're interested in Enfield. And I've already had some chats with Northside youth about potential to work together and maybe design some training sessions.
No, they're very, very good. And Auntie Andrew, you had your hand up next.
I just wanted to find out from Josie, what's in the wider circle, what sort of electrical items are you talking about repairing? Because although I don't do it anymore, I'm an ex-service engineer, and I worked on photocopiers, fax machines, CCTV, parking equipment. I used to do that. I don't do that no more, because I do a lot of stuff now with the Met Police, because I joined the Met Police about 11 years ago now. I was just wondering, in the wider, what items are you talking about repairing?
Yeah, that's a great question. It sounds like you have lots of experience, so maybe we can find some links. But generally, I guess with the repair cafes, we say sort of in terms of electrical items, any kind of electrical items, but there are exceptions. So we don't say it, no like big white goods. I think microwaves or fridges and items that get sort of bigger than that. And actually, we wouldn't tend to see those because people wouldn't necessarily want to carry those to the repair cafe. But we're talking kind of typical household appliances that anyone's got in their house, really. There's common ones that we see a lot of are things like kettles, toasters, lamps. But it can even be things like radios, it could be toothbrushes, there's all sorts of stuff. So maybe there's some links. I mean, I'm not a fixing expert myself, and I need to brush up on my skills, but maybe there's some links between what you've fixed in the past and these items.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, that's great.
And basically, sort of like, I was thinking, there are no community organizers. Yes, there should be. It would have been great if such community organizers existed and came and supported local communities to build, the kind of resilience that Hali was talking about, and various support networks. But personally, I'm involved in a newly set up residents association, and it is very, very difficult in an area which has a lot of hidden problems, such as, for instance, a large number of a large percentage of what are they called? Housing of multiple occupancy. Yes, these are hidden problems which do not come to the surface clearly, and a number of other problems, but where there's no support whatsoever to build community cohesion. And just so like that's what I'm struggling with at the moment with regard to this, that how do you Hali, I was just asking, I was wondering, with your experience, how you what is your experience in this project in the Midlands? Because you were saying that you worked also in an area which doesn't have much community cohesion.
I mean, just before you come on, Hali, I mean, what's interesting about your question, Aurora, is I had Jasmine come on, and she's obviously with her mother who was ill. That was her topic, that actually there are not enough public spaces any longer as there used to be. There's too much privatization, and she wants to develop a peer group in Enfield who can talk about how we can expand those sort of public spaces in the way you're talking about. But you put the question to Hali. Are you still there, Hali? And can you respond to that?
This is something that we've come across. Not only are there not enough spaces, but the spaces that exist are often uninhabitable. Addiction, antisocial behavior, all of those things, and people in are they called HMOs, multi-occupancy housing, don't have common spaces, so people are often isolated in their rooms, especially when extreme weather hits. And what we're finding is that those are the places that adaptation is least likely to happen, and unless the local authorities get together with residents and figure out ways to fix those basic problems, housing stock, damp, illness, chronic poor health. It's too soon to talk about adaptation. It really is. But also adaptation is part of those issues. So I think if you deal with the causes of ill-being, then the rest will start to come.
Okay. Anybody else? Tony, you wanted to say something,
I wanted to ask, I'm very sorry. I wanted to ask Josie another, just flick back to what Josie was talking about. I think she's got a big event coming up on the 20th, if I remember rightly, and I didn't know if she wanted to share that within the group.
Yes, I have. Thank you, Anthony. So yeah, we're running a community engagement event at Enfield Town Library on the 22nd of November between 12 and 2. And the purpose of that event is, I guess, a little bit similarly to today, is to give a bit more information on what our plans are, and opportunities for people to get involved, whether they're people who think that they might like to volunteer or have skills in repair, whether they'd like to help organise repair cafes, whether they're organisations or groups that would like to collaborate with us or help organise them. It'll just be a great opportunity to kind of spread the word, really, and hopefully network and meet some people who are interested in helping build this group. So if anyone knows, if you yourselves would like to come, we'd love to sort of have you there. If you're interested in volunteering or helping build this group, but also if you know of any people, community groups, organisations that we can help spread the word with about that event, and that would be massively appreciated. And I can pop a link to the event in the chat as well.
Okay, well, we'll promote that on the newsletter and our social networks as well, so people will know about that. Okay,
Thanks.
Anyone else at all on this? No. Okay. Right. So, is there any other issue anyone would like to raise at all today? No, well, because we're finishing a bit early, I'll just go through one thing. In our core group, we're going to discuss about some of the main themes that we're going to develop, hopefully, in the coming year. And I'll just go through them with you just to tell you the things we're talking about, in case you want to comment on that. One is the school climate action plans. You probably know, because we've done it in previous webinars, forums, that we've been working in partnership with several organisations, including the University College of London, to work with schools to develop climate action plans in schools. Now, we've got 5 schools already involved. We've got volunteers for that, and we're looking now to get other schools involved. And the Enfield Voluntary Action Group on November the 12th are organising a volunteers fair at the Dugdale Centre. We're going to have a table there, and we're going to try and get more volunteers for that. So the school climate action plans is one area that we will be developing. The other area is food security, national security. We've already done a webinar or a forum on food security, but Elaine, who's with us today, pointed out that there is a real problem that if we don't tackle food security, our national security will be in danger in all sorts of ways. And so we're going to look at that. And I think in February, we plan to hold our webinar forum on food security, national security, and see how maybe we can work with groups like the Global Food Security and their Global Food Security Program team. The other issue is heat excess. We've been already doing a lot of work on heat excess. We ran 5 meetings already to look at how heat excess affects various people, including the elderly. And as a result of what Clara said, I hope to contact the Lambeth Climate Partnership and see if we can do something jointly with them, including a joint webinar as well, to see if we can develop a strategy around heat excess as well. The other thing we want to look at is local governance and what's called the Donut Community Canvas. Don't know if Ben Bleat is on today, but he's been pushing that, and quite rightly. Kate Raworth is a person who wrote a book called Donut Economics, and it's about how our activities of consumption, consumer activity all the time, puts pressure on the planetary boundaries of biodiversity, acidification, heat, and so on. And if we cross those boundaries, we're in danger. And there is in Birmingham, in the Civic Square in Birmingham, a whole sort of plan that they developed to apply this to local areas. To what extent is the locality transgressing those boundaries? And we hope to look at that. And in January, we hope to do our webinar forum on that, which Ben is helping us to get together. And finally, climate justice, which really includes everything that we're talking about. And with the project that we're working with the University of Birmingham and Hali, we hope to develop, the project to develop a vulnerability index, to look at adaptive capacities, and to see how we can work constructively with the local authority. And indeed, our next webinar forum in November, because we won't have one in December because that's Christmas, but in November, will be on how we engage councillors and what different ways they can be of doing that. And Doug Taylor, who used to be the leader of Enfield Council and is still a councillor, he will be attending that. So we've got a lot of work that we're doing, and I thought you might be interested in knowing the discussions we're having now at the initial stage, which I think is pretty exciting. So does anybody have any comments on that? If they do, please tell us. No? Okay, well then Asani, very quickly.
All right, then my question is, when is the webinar on the the planetary boundaries? When is he holding?
On the planetary boundaries, that one we hope to be doing in January, at the end of January. Okay.
All right then.
And then the February one will be on food security and national security, and the November one will be on how we engage councillors and get them involved in the other statutory authorities in working with us. And the whole idea that Hali mentioned in her presentation of a community inclusive local resilience forum becomes central to that. Okay, anything else? No. Okay. Well.
Yeah. Can I get in just a word in edgeways, because I've just come into this.
Is that David? Yeah. Quickly.
Yeah. Very, very quickly. First of all, I'm just concerned that I understand this is a climate awareness campaign, which is obviously affecting the whole planet. But aren't there other much more pressing problems which go to the root of why you have the climate problem in the first place? The human condition is degrading exponentially. So why pick on climate? I mean, how about the systemic abuse of women by men? It's a worldwide phenomenon.
Well,
or the
David, but that's because
David,
that's because we're a climate action forum. I have another site and another organisation called GlobalNet 21, which deals with problems like that. But here we deal with the climate and climate justice.
But I'm suggesting that what you're doing is you're diverting your energies. You have the most pressing thing. By the way, just I didn't say one other point. I'll maybe very quickly. Are you familiar with a concept called geoengineering?
No, go ahead.
You don't. Okay. Well, look up again. His name is Dane Wigginton is an American. He's been doing it for years. Trump only heard about it the other day. There have been something called contrails, which are condensed water from jets, and chemtrails, which are chemicals. They've been dumping thousands of tons of toxic chemicals onto the earth. People it's taken into the food chain, and people are getting dementia and Alzheimer's at increasing rates, and it's because of this. Now, isn't that more important than I mean, these are all the consequences of people who are basically psychotic around the world.
I mean, yes, that is important, and I've read that. And if you'd like to send me some links on that, we'll do something to promote the information on that. That's really important. But
one other question: what sort of lead time have you got to change things around?
Well,
1 year, 2 years, 5 years? I mean,
I mean, there amongst scientists, there's difference of opinion about that. Some scientists say we've gone past the point of no return. Some scientists say we've got something like, to 2030 to make a difference. But let's get into David. Let's get into that argument here.
It's not an argument. I'm not trying to say an argument. What I'm trying to say is this: that when people are at a level of anxiety where they don't know whether they're going to have a job tomorrow, or they're having enough food to eat, or they're worried about the contamination, these are the things that need to be addressed first.
Yeah, I agree with you, and we have addressed some of those, and we will address those. And if you think we should, write to us, give us the links, and we'll take that up, okay? But what we're also doing is important as well. Okay, so send that to us, okay?
Okay, right.
Let's leave it there. And I mean, thank you everyone for attending. I mean, it's a well-attended forum again. Thank you for the three speakers for being with us, and you, Clara, with your code for staying on, which is great. You can go and have a rest now, which would be nice. So thank you, everyone, and I'll put the forum up onto I hope tomorrow, onto our website, and then the individual interviews in the next few days, and send out a newsletter with that, and also a newsletter about our next forum, which is in November. So thank you, everyone, and we'll close this now.
Thank you, and good night.